We passed on your opportunity. You know why we passed on you?
Who?
You.
I don't give a fuck about no opportunity, boy.
We passed on your
Search for a missing Pensacola mother of four has come to an end. Her body has been found. An arrest has been made. Today, Pensacola police charged her ex-boyfriend, Makeel Fountain, with homicide. Fountain arrested earlier this week on charges of tampering with evidence. He bonded out of jail yesterday.
On January 3rd, 2024 in Pensacola, 32-year-old Kayla Atwood followed her usual routine, dropping her children off before continuing her day. Hours later, surveillance footage captured her entering a yellow Penske truck, introducing a detail that would quickly dominate the investigation. But the timeline did not end there. By the afternoon, she had returned home, and within minutes, she was seen leaving again, this time in a different vehicle. After that moment, her movement stopped. As investigators traced her final hours, the focus shifted from a possible abduction to a series of calculated actions involving someone she knew. Deleted messages, missing surveillance footage, and conflicting statements began to surface. What initially appeared to be a random encounter soon revealed a structured sequence of events, one that raised deeper questions about what truly happened between her last known interactions and her disappearance. Every case starts with evidence and works toward the truth. We rely on verified facts, documented timelines, and official records, not speculation or sensationalism. Subscribe to stay updated as we examine each case clearly, carefully, and professionally. Kayla Lori Atwood was a 32-year-old resident of Pensacola. She was a mother of 4 children and maintained an active role in their daily lives. Her responsibilities included consistent school and daycare routines, which she followed without interruption. Records and witness statements confirm that she regularly transported her children to and from their scheduled locations and remained closely involved in their care. She lived in a residential neighborhood where her presence was familiar to those nearby. Neighbors recognized her routine movements, including morning departures and afternoon returns. There were no reported disruptions to her lifestyle in the days leading up to her disappearance. No evidence indicated preparation for travel, relocation, or voluntary absence. Kayla's known personal history included a prior relationship with Makeel Fountain. This relationship had ended prior to the events of January 2024. Despite the separation, communication between the two had not completely ceased. From an investigative standpoint, Kayla's daily structure reflected stability. Her responsibilities as a parent required consistent presence, and her routine behavior showed no deviation. There were no indications of financial distress, disappearance planning, or external threats reported prior to the incident. The absence of preparatory actions or behavioral changes suggests that her disappearance was not voluntary. The consistency of her routine indicates that any interruption was unexpected and occurred within a narrow time frame. On January 3rd, 2024, Kayla Atwood began her day following her usual schedule. She transported her children to school and daycare facilities in Pensacola. This activity marked the last confirmed instance of normal behavior. After completing the drop-offs, Kayla did not return to retrieve her children later that day. This deviation was immediately identified as unusual. Individuals responsible for the children noted her absence and initiated concern. The failure to return for her children served as the first clear indication that something had disrupted her routine. Given her consistent history, this break in pattern was treated as significant by both family members and authorities. The abandonment of a fixed daily responsibility, specifically childcare pickup, established a critical starting point for investigators. It narrowed the window in which the disruption occurred to a period shortly after the morning drop-off. This moment became the anchor for reconstructing her movements. As investigators began collecting surveillance footage from various locations, a key detail emerged. Cameras in the West Belmont Street area captured Kayla entering a yellow Penske box truck. This footage quickly became central to the investigation. The visual of a woman entering an unfamiliar commercial vehicle led to early speculation of possible abduction. The vehicle's distinct color and branding made it easily identifiable, allowing authorities to trace it. Investigators located the driver of the Penske truck. He was interviewed and cooperated with law enforcement. His account provided clarification that altered the direction of the case. According to the driver, Kayla entered the truck voluntarily. He transported her and later dropped her off at her residence at approximately 2:30 p.m. There was no indication of coercion or conflict during the interaction. After verification of his account and cross-checking with available evidence, the driver was cleared of involvement. The Penske truck, initially perceived as a potential link to abduction, was determined to be unrelated to the crime itself. This shifted investigative focus away from unknown individuals and toward known contacts. The truck's sighting became a misleading lead, important for a timeline reconstruction, but not indicative of criminal activity. With the truck driver's statement verified, investigators began assembling a detailed sequence of Kayla's final known movements. Morning. Kayla drops off her children at school and daycare. Late morning. She is seen entering the yellow Penske truck. Afternoon, 2:30 p.m., she is dropped off at her residence. Shortly after, she is observed entering another vehicle. This final movement, entering a second vehicle, became the most critical detail in the timeline. Surveillance and witness accounts linked the second vehicle to an individual known to Kayla. That individual was identified as her former partner, Mikhail Fountain. The transition from a public, documented interaction, the Penske truck, to a private encounter marked a shift in visibility. After entering the second vehicle, Kayla was no longer seen in any confirmed footage. This moment represents the last known point at which her movements could be externally verified. Mikhail Fountain, a male in his mid-30s, was identified as a person of interest based on his connection to Kayla and his presence within the reconstructed timeline. He had previously been in a relationship with Kayla Atwood. Despite the end of that relationship, communication between them continued intermittently. Investigators obtained records indicating that Kayla and Fountain exchanged text messages on January 3rd. The investigation into the disappearance of Kayla Lori Atwood did not immediately begin as a homicide case. In its earliest stage, it was treated as a missing person report triggered by a disruption in routine. The failure to return for her children after a scheduled drop-off established urgency, but not yet criminal certainty. That changed as investigators began reconstructing her final movements with precision. Law enforcement in Pensacola initiated a structured timeline analysis, starting with confirmed surveillance footage and witness statements. The first major inconsistency emerged from digital evidence. Phone records indicated that Atwood had been in active communication on the day she disappeared, but portions of those communications were no longer retrievable through standard access. Investigators escalated to forensic extraction methods, revealing that multiple text threads had been deliberately deleted. Simultaneously, canvassing efforts in her residential area uncovered another anomaly. Several homes equipped with surveillance systems reported missing or altered footage within the relevant time frame. In at least one instance, a male individual had approached neighbors requesting access to their camera systems. Follow-up examination confirmed that portions of recorded video had been removed. This convergence of missing digital data, both from personal devices and external surveillance, shifted the investigative classification. The case was formally reclassified from a missing person inquiry to a suspected homicide. Attention centered on Mikhail Fountain, an individual with a prior personal relationship to Atwood. Digital forensics placed him in communication with her on the day of her disappearance. His initial statements to law enforcement conflicted with recovered data. He denied recent contact, but extracted records contradicted that claim. Further scrutiny revealed behavioral indicators following Atwood's disappearance. Fountain's presence in the neighborhood, combined with his attempts to access and alter surveillance systems, introduced a pattern consistent with evidence suppression. At this stage, investigators had not yet recovered a body, but the accumulation of digital inconsistencies, witness statements, and timeline reconstruction provided sufficient basis to prioritize Fountain as the primary suspect. On January 11, 2024, 8 days after Atwood was last seen, the investigation reached a critical development. Search operations expanded beyond residential zones into less populated areas of Escambia County. A wooded location near Fairfield Drive and Crow Road was identified as a potential site of interest based on investigative leads. Late that night, search teams located human remains in a secluded section of the wooded area. The body was confirmed to be Kayla Atwood. The condition of the recovery site provided immediate forensic significance. The body had been placed in a shallow grave. There was no indication of natural burial processes. The placement was deliberate and recent. Soil disturbance patterns suggested manual excavation using basic tools, followed by partial concealment. This discovery marked a formal confirmation of homicide. The location itself became a critical element of the case. Its relative isolation reduced the likelihood of accidental discovery, indicating prior knowledge of the area or intentional selection to delay detection. Investigators documented the site extensively, collecting soil samples, trace materials, and any object associated with the burial. Forensic teams conducted an initial assessment at the scene before transferring remains for autopsy. While specific findings from the autopsy contributed to the legal case, the presence of a shallow grave alone established that the death was not accidental. The recovery also established a direct link between the suspect and post-crime activity. The act of transporting and burying the body required time, mobility, and intent. This extended the scope of the investigation from a single moment of violence to a sequence of actions involving concealment. Following the recovery of the body, law enforcement moved rapidly to secure an arrest. Mikhail Fountain was taken into custody shortly after discovery. The charges filed reflected both the act of killing and the subsequent attempts to interfere with the investigation. These included murder, tampering with evidence. The evidentiary framework supporting these charges was built through multiple layers of corroboration.
Tanner Stewart is in the studio to explain the clues that led to Fountain's arrest.
Sue, Pensacola Police Chief Eric Randall says crucial evidence led to that discovery of Kayla Atwood's body, but what's unclear is how police found this specific location and how Kayla Atwood died.
34-year-old McKeel Fountain has been processed in the Escambia County Jail twice this week. On Tuesday night, Fountain faced charges of tampering with evidence after police determined he deleted surveillance footage and text messages related to Kayla Atwood's disappearance. Thursday, he bonded out. Overnight, Fountain was arrested again, this time for homicide, after the mother of four's remains were found in a shallow grave along Crow Road in Escambia County, just miles from where she was last seen at her home, getting into a vehicle that matched the description of Fountain's white pickup truck, according to this arrest report. Pensacola Police Chief Eric Randall says crucial evidence was received that was instrumental in the recovery of Atwood's remains. PPD partnered with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and Escambia County Sheriff's Office, using specialized canines to search.
Legacy K9, they're nationally certified cadaver dogs, so they help us when we have particular areas that we want to search. Instead of a wide area search, they were able to hone us into a very specific area, which helped bring this to a conclusion a lot faster.
Kayla Atwood's sister-in-law expressing gratitude to law enforcement for bringing closure to Atwood's disappearance.
I wanted to give a thanks to the community on behalf of the Atwood family. We really appreciate the support, all of the tips that were sent in. We want to also give thanks to the Pensacola Police Department for working on this case and helping us bring Kayla home.
Chief Randall says McKeel Fountain hasn't been cooperative with investigators in this case. He's being held in the Escambia County Jail with no bond. In the studio, I'm Tanner Stewart.
Investigators identified specific time windows where expected surveillance footage was missing. These gaps were not random. They aligned with the reconstructed timeline of Atwood's final movements. The absence of footage from key locations created negative evidence, indicating removal rather than non-existence. Forensic analysis of mobile devices revealed intentional deletion of text messages between Fountain and Atwood. Recovery tools were able to reconstruct portions of these exchanges, confirming active communication on the day of disappearance. The deletion itself was treated as an act of concealment. Residents in the area provided statements placing Fountain near locations of interest after Atwood's disappearance. His attempt to access surveillance systems were independently confirmed by multiple individuals. These accounts established a pattern of behavior consistent with evidence manipulation. The final confirmed interaction involving Atwood was linked to Fountain. This placed him at the end of the victim's known timeline, a critical factor in establishing investigative priority. Together, these elements formed a cohesive narrative: contact, disappearance, concealment, and attempted erasure of evidence. The arrest formalized a transition from investigation to prosecution. The case proceeded through the judicial system in Florida, where prosecutors presented a structured argument based on digital forensics, witness accounts, and physical evidence. The prosecution's case emphasized continuity. Rather than relying on a single piece of evidence, it demonstrated how multiple independent findings aligned. Communication records placed the suspect in contact with the victim. Surveillance inconsistencies indicated deliberate interference. Witness statements confirmed suspicious behavior after the disappearance. The body's recovery established homicide and concealment. The defense challenged elements of interpretation, particularly regarding intent and direct causation. However, the cumulative weight of evidence established a consistent sequence of events that the jury found credible. After deliberation, the jury returned a verdict convicting Mikhail Fountain of second-degree murder. Sentencing followed, resulting in life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The court's decision reflected the totality of the evidence, including both the act itself and the subsequent efforts to obstruct investigation. The inclusion of evidence tampering reinforced the conclusion that the actions were not isolated but part of a broader sequence. The early stages of the case were influenced by the sighting of a yellow Penske truck. This detail initially suggested the possibility of an unknown third party. However, further investigation determined that the driver was not involved in criminal activity. The focus on the truck delayed attention from more relevant connections, demonstrating how visible but incomplete evidence can redirect investigative resources. The case highlighted the role of digital evidence in modern investigations. Deleted text messages and missing surveillance footage became central to establishing intent. The act of deletion, rather than eliminating evidence, introduced additional indicators of involvement. Forensic recovery techniques allowed investigators to reconstruct partial data, transforming attempted concealment into prosecutable evidence. The final confirmed contact between Atwood and someone within her personal circle shifted the investigative framework. The case reinforced a recurring pattern in homicide investigations. The perpetrator is often known to the victim. This pattern influenced both investigative direction and prosecutorial strategy. The entire sequence, from last confirmed normal activity to disappearance and subsequent concealment, occurred within a single day. This compressed timeline reduced the number of variables and concentrated investigative focus. It also increased the significance of each individual data point, as there were fewer opportunities for external interference. The outcome of the case resulted in 4 children losing their mother. This fact remained constant throughout the investigation, but did not influence procedural decisions. Law enforcement and judicial processes operated based on evidence, independent of personal impact. The case demonstrated several operational principles. Modern investigations rely heavily on digital data. Even when attempts are made to erase information, recovery tools can reconstruct enough detail to establish timelines and connections. Video systems, both public and private, contributed to reconstructing movement patterns. The absence of footage became as significant as its presence, particularly when tied to deliberate removal. The case reinforced that proximity and familiarity can play a central role in criminal activity. Initial assumptions often prioritize unknown threats, but evidence may indicate otherwise. At the beginning of the investigation, the available evidence pointed outward. A commercial vehicle, a public street, and a seemingly random interaction suggested external involvement. As the investigation progressed, each layer of evidence redirected focus inward. Communication records, behavioral patterns, and forensic findings converge on a single individual within the victim's personal network. The initial narrative, centered on a potential stranger, was replaced by a documented sequence involving someone already connected to her. The resolution of the case was not driven by a single discovery, but by the accumulation of details that, when aligned, established a complete and consistent account of events. Facts verified. Case concluded. Justice is determined by what can be proven. Subscribe for more documented cases and real criminal investigations.